Hey you, welcome back to Secrets with Maeve, the space for the conversations we usually keep to ourselves. I'm Maeve. Today we're talking about something I know so many of us struggle with in silence. She won't say no. If you ask these 7 questions, let's get into it. If you've ever wanted closeness with a woman but felt your throat tighten before you spoke, this is for you. Because the fear isn't rejection, it's what rejection makes you believe about yourself. Listen closely. Most men think intimacy is created by saying the right words at the right time. A clever question, a smooth line, a perfectly timed confession. That belief quietly destroys connection before it even has a chance to breathe. Not because women are cruel, but because intimacy doesn't begin in your mouth. It begins in your emotional posture, and she feels that long before she hears your question. Here's the truth. Most men were never taught. Women don't reject questions. They reject pressure. They reject hidden agendas. They reject the feeling that something is being taken from them before it's freely offered. When a man asks a question hoping for intimacy but needing a specific answer to feel worthy, she senses the weight of that need instantly. It turns curiosity into a test, and no one feels safe being tested. Real intimacy grows when a woman feels 3 things at the same time: safety, emotional presence, and choice. Miss even one, and the door quietly closes. Ask any question you want. But if she doesn't feel she can answer honestly without consequences, she'll pull away. Not from you, but from the future version of you she senses is waiting on her response. Most men were taught to hide vulnerability, then magically expect intimacy to appear. But intimacy is vulnerability that feels respected, not exploited. The irony is brutal. The more you try to protect yourself from rejection, the more likely you are to create it. Because guarded questions sound like traps, and emotionally intelligent women have learned to step around traps. Think about this. When you ask a woman something personal, she's not just answering the words, she's answering the emotional frame behind them. Is this man grounded if I say no? Is he present if I hesitate? Is he still himself if I don't give him what he wants? These are the real questions being answered in her nervous system. This is why so many men feel confused. They ask politely, they listen, they do everything right, and still intimacy doesn't deepen because politeness without emotional clarity feels empty, and listening without self-anchoring feels unstable. Women don't open up to men who disappear inside their reactions. Here's a quiet shift that changes everything. Intimacy-friendly questions are not designed to get closeness. They are designed to offer space for her to reveal herself at her own pace, space where her answer won't define your value, space where curiosity exists without demand. When a woman feels that, her defenses soften naturally, not because you convinced her, but because her body no longer feels rushed. And intimacy, real intimacy, only shows up when there's no rush. If you've been rejected before, it wasn't because you asked. It was because the question carried fear. And fear is loud, even when your voice is calm. Here's something almost no one will tell you. Women are wired to notice emotional honesty before words, not clever lines, not confidence, not how you look or how smooth you sound. They notice whether your inner world is stable when you ask a question and whether your presence can hold theirs without judgment. That's why some men can ask deeply personal questions and get answers that feel like unlocking a hidden room, and others can ask the same question and get silence, a shrug, or a polite brush off. It's not the words, it's the invisible frame. Emotional framing is everything. Imagine you ask a woman, what do you really want in a relationship? If your eyes betray expectation or your body tenses, she'll answer not from truth, but from strategy. She'll measure the risk, calculate what pleases you, and give a safe version of herself. But if you ask with grounded curiosity, shoulders relaxed, tone steady, and no invisible strings attached, she'll feel safe to answer honestly. That's intimacy. That's the hidden psychology most men ignore. Now, here's the brutal part. Most men overcomplicate questions because they confuse intimacy with agreement. They want her to like their answers, match their energy, or validate their self-image. That's a trap because women aren't searching for your agreement. They're searching for containment, someone who can hear them without collapsing or trying to fix them, someone who won't react like a storm if they reveal a hidden truth. Your job is not to impress. Your job is to be present while she impresses herself. Let's get practical. Questions that build intimacy aren't interrogations, they're invitations. A simple, "What makes you feel truly alive?" can open more doors than a perfectly rehearsed compliment. Or, "When was the last time you felt completely yourself?" These aren't invasive. They are emotionally liberating because she chooses what to reveal, when, and how. And that choice is the subtle currency of connection. Here's the sneaky truth. Women want to feel understood, but they also want to test whether you can handle understanding. They want to know if I open up, will he shrink, retreat, or judge me? That's why so many men get blocked at seemingly simple questions, not because they're boring, not because she isn't interested, but because he isn't anchored enough to stay present while she navigates her own truth. And yes, it's harder than it sounds because most men are trained to avoid risk emotionally. They hide behind humor, charm, or logic, thinking that shields them from rejection. But those shields block intimacy faster than any no. Emotional risk is unavoidable. But here's the empowering part. Once you accept it, once you stop clinging to outcome, everything changes. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes a signal that you're entering a deeper connection. The questions you ask then become bridges, not traps. The women who reveal themselves most fully are doing so not because you ask the right question, but because your emotional presence makes it safe to answer. And that is the secret almost every man misses. You are not trying to control her answers. You are simply offering her a space where she can control them. And when that happens, her walls don't just lower, they melt. If you've ever felt like you fail at intimacy, it wasn't your fault. You were using questions like tools to extract closeness instead of creating conditions for it. And now, when you understand this, every question you ask can carry the quiet power of freedom, not pressure. Here's the part most men completely overlook. Timing is invisible, but it's the secret backbone of intimacy. A question asked at the wrong moment, even the most carefully crafted one, can feel like an ambush. Your words don't exist in isolation. They collide with her emotional rhythm. She's constantly reading energy, tension, and presence long before your question reaches her ears. If your inner state signals urgency, neediness, or hidden expectation, she feels it before the words land and instinctively closes off. That's why so many men think they failed because she didn't answer. They didn't fail. They just asked at the wrong emotional frequency. You need to understand this. Intimacy isn't created in a vacuum. It's a flow. Every smile, every pause, every subtle tone contributes. A man who rushes, who wants immediate answers, unknowingly layers pressure onto the interaction. A man who lingers in calm curiosity, allowing her to show herself at her own pace, sends a silent, irresistible signal. I am safe. I can contain you. I am not here to consume, but to witness. Women feel that instinctively, and when they feel it, even the most guarded hearts start to soften. Now, let's address the subtle art of vulnerability. Most men fear showing any weakness because they've been taught it equals loss of power. But here's the paradox. Vulnerability, when offered correctly, increases perceived strength because it tells her you are grounded enough to be open even when you don't know the outcome. A simple, honest statement before a question like, I honestly don't know what you'll say, but I'm curious, can transform a potentially tense moment into one of connection. You're not asking to control her. You're asking to understand her world. And that subtle shift is magnetic. Here's a psychological nuance most men miss. Women subconsciously test whether a man's curiosity is self-serving or genuinely for her. Questions like, do you like me enough to tell me the truth? Or will you answer honestly even if I don't like it? Trigger defensiveness because they imply judgment. True intimacy questions are framed without implied consequence. They are invitations to reveal, not checkpoints of loyalty. The moment she senses that, she relaxes. The moment she relaxes, she opens. And the moment she opens, you enter a level of connection few men ever experience. But there's another layer. Emotional intelligence isn't just about asking, it's about receiving. How you respond to her answers is more important than the questions themselves. Most men react with commentary, advice, or subtle evaluation. That's the instant intimacy dies. Real presence means listening without immediate judgment, without planning your next move. Let her story exist in its own weight. You do not need to fix it, analyze it, or improve it. You only need to witness it fully, and that quietly is one of the most intoxicating forms of emotional power a man can wield. Think of it like water flowing into a vessel. If the vessel is rigid, the water bounces away, splashes, and escapes. If the vessel is open, stable, and unshakable, the water fills it naturally. That vessel is your emotional presence. Your questions are not scoops trying to pull the water. They are gentle openings that allow her to pour herself freely. The paradox is clear. When you stop trying to force intimacy, you actually create it faster than any strategy or line ever could. And finally, understand this. Every question carries energy long after it's asked. Your tone, your body, your silence afterward. All of it speaks louder than the words. Master the invisible layers, and you master the unspoken rules of connection. Miss them, and even the most brilliant question falls flat. Here's the truth that most men will never hear out loud. Intimacy is not earned by cleverness, charm, or persistence. It's earned by presence. Women don't fall for what you say. They fall for the space you create. That space is not empty. It's alive with understanding, patience, and unwavering composure. It's invisible, yet every woman senses it immediately. When you ask a question from that space, it lands differently. It doesn't feel like a probe. It feels like a safe invitation to reveal herself without calculation, without fear, without having to perform. Most men make the fatal mistake of seeking intimacy through outcome rather than atmosphere. They think if I ask this, she will. They measure success by her answers, not by the quality of the connection. That mindset is the fastest way to push a woman away. Women do not answer questions to validate your worth. They answer when your worth is already internally stable, independent of her responses. Stability is magnetic. Neediness is a wall. Desire without pressure is a bridge. That is the unspoken law of female psychology that almost no man fully grasps. Let's talk about emotional calibration. Every woman has a rhythm, a subtle fluctuating current of vulnerability, openness, and defense. The questions you ask must match that rhythm, not override it. Too early and your curiosity feels intrusive. Too late and the moment passes into indifference. The men who master intimacy intuitively feel her emotional current. They adjust tone, timing, and posture with an almost invisible finesse. That skill is learned not from books, not from advice. It's learned by paying attention to her energy minute by minute without self-consciousness or expectation. Now consider this. Women are constantly reading for safety, not just in words, but in body language, eye contact, micro expressions, and emotional resonance. If your presence wavers, if your attention is fragmented, or if your desire seeps as pressure, the connection collapses. A simple question like, "What's your favorite memory from your childhood?" can either bloom into intimacy or vanish into guardedness, depending entirely on the unspoken energy you carry. Presence is the difference between a question that unlocks a soul and one that shuts a door. Another subtle truth, curiosity without judgment, is the master key. Most men ask with implicit evaluation. They want her to answer the right way. That is the fastest route to silence. The questions that build intimacy instead communicate. I'm here to understand you, not to judge you. When she feels that, walls dissolve naturally. She begins to reveal her fears, her desires, and the hidden layers of her mind that she usually protects. That is where true intimacy lives, behind the curtain of judgment-free curiosity. But here's where men stumble. The next step is even harder than asking. Listening fully without internal commentary is rare. Most men are already rehearsing responses, advice, or reactions while she speaks. That fractured attention destroys the subtle energy that nurtures closeness. Listening is not passive. It is active containment of her truth without interruption, evaluation, or reinterpretation. It is a conscious choice to honor her vulnerability without trying to alter it. That is the invisible bridge that turns questions into intimacy. Finally, recognize the paradox. The more you resist controlling the outcome, the more influence you gain, the less you need her answers to define your value. The more she opens. True intimacy is never about extraction. It's about creation. The creation of a space where her inner world can be expressed freely, fully, and safely. That is the rarest power a man can possess. And once mastered, every question you ask carries the potential to transform a connection from ordinary to unforgettable. Here's the final truth that separates men who simply talk to women from men who create deep, lasting connection. The questions themselves are secondary. The real power lies in how you carry yourself while asking them. Women feel everything. Your calm, your tension, your curiosity, your hidden need. If a question comes wrapped in fear, expectation, or desperation, it's rejected before she even hears it. But if a question comes from grounded presence, emotional steadiness, and authentic curiosity, it lands like an invitation into a room she's been waiting to enter. Think about it this way. Every woman has experienced men who chase, who demand, who strategize. And every woman has also experienced men who simply show up. Men who are steady, aware, and respectful of the invisible currents of her mind. Those men don't manipulate. They facilitate. They create the conditions where honesty, vulnerability, and intimacy are natural, effortless, and safe. That is the hidden psychology of attraction and connection. The kind most men never understand because they mistake cleverness for presence. Your questions should never serve a hidden agenda. They should serve as bridges to understanding. What do you dream about when no one is watching? What makes you feel completely yourself? When do you feel most alive? These aren't lines. They're gentle invitations for her to explore her own emotional landscape. And here's the subtle trick. The more she reveals herself freely, the more she experiences you as someone who can hold space without collapse. That's intimacy. That's the invisible magnetism that pulls her closer without force. But there's one more layer, the after effect of a question. Most men ask, then immediately fill the silence with words, explanations, or reassurances. Silence is a weapon and a gift. A pregnant pause after a question communicates confidence, patience, and respect for her process. It tells her, I can wait. I can listen. I am not defined by your answer. That pause, subtle as it is, has more power than any clever follow-up line. It gives her autonomy, and autonomy is irresistible. Finally, understand this paradox. The more you detach your self-worth from the answer, the more you increase the likelihood of getting an answer. The more you offer space without expectation, the more she offers her inner world. The more you resist pressure, the more she leans in. That's the secret equation. Almost no man is taught. And once you internalize it, every question you ask becomes a tool of intimacy rather than a gamble against rejection. Here's your personal challenge before we close. Imagine the last time you asked a woman something meaningful and felt fear, doubt, or need behind your words. Now imagine you ask the same question, but completely anchored in your presence, curiosity, and emotional steadiness. Which version of you would she respond to more openly? Take a moment, visualize it, and then share your answer in the comments. If this insight hit you, like this video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Your ability to create true intimacy begins with awareness, and the shift starts now. Your next conversation could be the first one she feels fully herself in, and you'll know exactly how to listen, understand, and respond without breaking the invisible bond.